7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello boys and girls, my name is Miss Reidinger and today we will be discussing the proper squat technique. I'll have great demonstrations from my great friend Liz. She's going to show us what good technique is and what some things are that we should completely avoid. So let's start with that. One thing that we want to make sure that we don't do right off the bat is have our feet too close together. The key to squatting is having them at shoulder width apart or maybe a tad wider. You want to make sure that your toes are pointed out, not inwards. They're okay to have straight out. Some people prefer to have their toes out a little bit just as a form of comfort or stability. When getting into the squat, you want to make sure that you send your hips back first. It's the first thing you think about once getting to the bottom of the squat. Sending your hips back will put your knees behind your ankles. So you want to make sure that you do this because it will relieve a lot of the impact once you load up the weight and even your body weight. It'll relieve the impact on the joints and help to avoid future injuries. So she's going to send her hips back. She's going to sit down and her knees will follow right behind her ankles. When she's down at the bottom, you see that a lot of her weight is down at her heels. I can slide my hand right underneath the tops of her foot, which is great because that means that a lot of her weight from the back end of her is down at her heels.
As she goes to squat, she keeps her hips back, squatting low and keeping her knees behind her ankles.
So you're in the gym and you want to add some weight to your squat. Now, I would advise that once you start to do these movements, you start with low weight and that you really have a spotter. If you're a new lifter, you're a beginner, make sure you start small and work your way up. The three fundamental lifts that include squatting are front squat, back squat, and overhead squat. So today we'll learn all three and we'll start with the front squat. So the ball will rest right at your collarbone. Some very key points when talking about how to do a front squat is you want to make sure that your elbows are pointed as towards the ceiling as you can get them. A lot of people that are not as flexible are going to have trouble with this, but once you load up the weight, it's going to be a lot easier for you to control it up and down while having the bar in this position. So Liz will work on getting her elbows up. Another thing that you want to make sure you pay close attention to is that you rest the bar right on your fingertips. It's kind of hard to demonstrate this just because this does not weigh anything. So once your bar is all set, you're all set up here, you're gonna do the same fundamental movements while going back into the squat. Your hips are gonna be sent back first, which allows you to sit in a chair and your knees are gonna go right behind your ankles. From the side, it would look like this. Her hips go back, and she sits right down in the chair. One more time. She sits right down, and you can tell that just like in the normal squat, her weight goes right down to the heels. I can still fit my hand and fingers underneath the front of the balls of her feet. This is really important, especially when you start to add weight because it'll allow you to keep the weight centered and won't cause an accident. The next one we will discuss is the overhead squat. This can be very tricky for beginners, so make sure that if you are a beginner, you definitely have a spotter and you start small with weight. So the bar will start overhead. A lot of the times, people aren't going to be very flexible to hold the bar with a lot of weight over their heads, so what happens is their arms are farther apart in the bar. This just provides more comfort when squatting down, and especially when you add weight, it's going to be a lot easier to carry and manage. So, one key part about overhead squats is you want to make sure that your shoulders are shrugged up and that you really tighten your core. This will help keep the weight centered over your head when you squat down. So she puts her hips back, she sits down, and her knees are behind her ankles. One thing that's really important while she's down here is that her back is straight. You can draw a straight line right down the center of her back, and it keeps the bar and the head and the back in line with each other. From the side, it would look like this. She sits down, back straight, knees behind the ankles, and toes slightly off the ground, just to show that a lot of her weight is in the back. Last but not least is the back squat. So now the weight will start behind her head, resting on the tops of her shoulder blades. Depending on who you are, some people will like to have their hands closer together, or some people will have them farther apart. It's personal preference. whichever you feel most comfortable with. Again, like with the overhead squat, it's very important to keep your back straight in this movement just because it can eliminate future injuries and will really help you to get the most you can out of this certain lift. Same goes for the back squats as any other squat. You send your hips back first, squat down, knees go behind the ankles. Back straight. From the side I'll look with this. Thanks so much for watching our video, and thanks to Liz for demonstrating for me, and I hope you hit the gym soon.